Well, thank you very much for coming. This is Natalie Marlow. Her first novel, Needless Alley, is set in Birmingham in 1933, and it's the first in a new series from the Baskerville imprint of John Murray, who also published Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is amazing. And Jane Austen.
Yeah, and Byron, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a remarkable history.
Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And me.
Yeah, oh. Carry on then.
So yeah, could you please give us a sort of a brief introduction to the book and its main character and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I'm really rubbish at this because I just end up telling the whole of the story.
Stop you before you get to
So, like Martin said, Needless Alley is set in 1930s Birmingham. About this time of year, actually. My next novel is really cold and wintry, but Needless Alley is a very summery novel, and I just reread some of it, and he's a very sweaty detective, my detective. But yes, it's set in 1930s Birmingham, and my detective at the beginning of the novel only takes on divorce cases. So if you're a Philip Marlow fan, if you're a Chandler fan, he's like the anti-Philip Marlow because he only does divorce cases. And in those days, you needed evidence of adultery to divorce your wife, and often that meant photographic evidence of people in flagrante in hotel bedrooms. So it was William's job to gather that evidence. He was what Philip Marlow would have called a grubby little man hanging around in hotel corridors. Unfortunately for William, or fortunately for William, he falls in love with a woman he's meant to be tailing, who's the wife of a leading industrialist and a fascist. And that love affair is quite intense and life-changing for William. But it also precipitates a kind of a noirish, nightmarish situation for him. And he spends most of the novel trying to extricate himself from that situation. Can you see I'm trying not to give away?
Yeah.
Spoiler. But yeah, so that's the basis of the novel. And trying to talk about it even more means I do give away massive plot points, and my editor would be really cross if I did that, so I don't think I should do that.
Fair enough. So are your influences the classic, old school, hard-boiled detective?
Yes. Yeah, so a massive reader from an early age, very early age, and inappropriate reading material.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really inappropriate reading material from a very early age. And we were talking about libraries earlier. My grandparents were great library users.
Yeah.
And I had a reading nana who was absolutely voracious in her reading. So she was a massive fan of those lovely 80s blockbuster novels. They're about that thick. Yeah. The Wheel of Fortune, and anything by Catherine Cookson, Lace, those massive sort of 80s blockbuster novels. But she was also a fan of film noir. Mm-hmm. So she read a lot of Chandler, a lot of Hammett, a lot of Ross MacDonald, who wrote the Lou Archibalds. And my paternal granddad, my other granddad, he was a real pulp guy. Mm-hmm. If it had like a bosomy blonde on the cover, he'd read it. Yeah. And they would pass on this great reading material to me. So from an early age, I was kind of, reading stuff I shouldn't. And I kind of joke that, well, definitely Agatha Christie was definitely my Enid Blyton.
Right.
And, Dashiell Hammett was my Roald Dahl, because I was reading this stuff at 9, 10, 11. Yeah. And it was and I sometimes think that what you enjoy in your adolescence, particularly your early adolescence, it sticks, it imprints on you. So yes, I still enjoy Agatha Christie. It's still a comfort read for me. But what I'm most interested in terms of the genre I'm writing, is those kind of hard-boiled, detective writers of the 30s and 40s, very much so, and very much an influence.
Yeah. Do you find it interesting to tackle it yourself because it's such a male-dominated, quite sort of, macho, chauvinistic worldview that a lot of them put forward?
Yeah, and I write from William's point of view.
Yeah.
And that's really very interesting. Absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested. In all honesty, I came from an academic background when I was looking at this. So my MA thesis is on Dashiell Hammett, and also Nietzschean imagery in Dashiell Hammett. So very masculine, Übermensch, very masculine, and I'm absolutely fascinated by portrayals of masculinity within the genre, but also within the genre of that period. It's a fascinating period when you're looking at portrayals of masculinity, because you've got this very hard-boiled, tough idea of what these guys were like. But when you do read the texts running through these narratives, there's like a vein of vulnerability and a vein of trauma that may have come from as an overhang from the First World War, because if you were in your 30s in 1930, then you were more than likely have served during that war, which was incredibly brutal on a lot of young men and would have been very formative. But also perhaps this kind of idea of figuring out what it is to be a man in the modern age, in the industrial age, and I was absolutely fascinated by that. And as a woman, it was so interesting to put myself in a man's shoes, to write from a man's point of view.
Was it difficult for you?
Was it difficult for me? Do you know, once I started not to overthink it, it wasn't, because ultimately I came to the conclusion that men and women are incredibly similar. So, and what was the only difference I felt was that it was William's physicality.
Right, like a power thing.
Yeah. So, and for that I kind of drew on, obviously, my husband, but also the other men in my family. I'm from a boxing family.
Oh.
So professional boxers, heavyweight boxers, and big guys. And I know these big guys, grew up with these big tough guys, but they're not that big and they're not that tough at heart. They're just teddy bears. Right. But if I know for all the women here will know this. I've got teenage daughters, or daughters coming into their 20s now, and I'm at home. I'm cooking a spaghetti bolognese and I don't have an onion. Yeah. The co-op is 15 minutes walk from my house, and my husband will drive to get that onion, even though he's had a shower, he's in his pyjamas or whatever, he's just got home from work, he will drive to get that onion rather than let my girls walk 15 minutes in the dark.
Right.
And that's the difference. If you're a man in the world of crime fiction, if you're a male character in the world of crime fiction, you can, at 3 o'clock in the morning, walk around the back alleys of Birmingham and feel reasonably safe, particularly if you know how to, what my granddad would have said, take care of yourself. If you know how to throw a punch, and if you are physically active and physically able, that is not as a vulnerable position. But for a woman in the 1930s, that would have been such a vulnerable place to be. And I found that fascinating, being in that physicality of like, oh wow, I wonder what it's like to just walk anywhere, whatever time of night it is. I wonder what it's like. And I loved doing that. I loved doing that.
This came up on our last author visit from Anthony Edrington, because he's obviously a man, but he was writing a female main character.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how, you know, if you meet someone off the internet, and it's like a famous thing where if you're a woman, if you're a man, your worry is that you've been catfished, but she doesn't look the same.
Yes.
If you're a woman, your worry is that you will be murdered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm probably going too deep into it now, but you know, when you watch Marvel films with your kids and you see Scarlett Johansson just get kicked in the teeth about 25 times, I'm thinking that's not the reality of it. And she jumps back up and starts kicking back.
Yeah.
And I thought that's not the reality of it.
And you see women who weigh about 100 pounds throwing around men who
Oh
weigh about
yeah,
200
yeah.
pounds.
And of course,
Okay.
yeah, that's it. So I was sort of fascinated by the violence of my genre and how that is essentially gendered. Not necessarily in the fact that male violence perpetrated against women, but that men are freer because they fear it less than we do.
I noticed in the book as well that every, I don't think I'm giving anything away, but that every woman in the book has a terrible time. Like every single woman. Every woman and girl is exploited or used in some way and subject to violence in lots of different ways, which I thought was interesting that you don't get as much of a focus on that in books written by male crime writers.
It was by stealth. Yeah, I've got I think I've got a reasonably big male readership for a female crime writer, perhaps because I write hard-boiled stuff, you know. But yes, I didn't want to. Neither Sally is quite gritty for that reason, because I didn't want to downplay that.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to downplay that, and I wanted the women in my novel to be, you know, I think women are so resilient, aren't we? You know, and I wanted them to represent that resilience, not just the resilience of women nowadays, but women of my grandparents and great-grandparents' generation. Oh, blimey, those girls were tough, you know. And on a side note, I just finished, when I started writing Nida Sally, I just finished reading a book on the Jimmy Savile case.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and it stuck.
Yeah.
It really stuck. And I think a lot of my concerns about that, about exploitation of young working class women
by powerful men.
Don't
answer to anyone.
Absolutely, and of course Epstein as well came soon, you know, close on the heels of that. And you know, and yeah, it was my way of addressing that, I think, or looking into that, making those women real, you know.
And I think if you downplayed it, it would kind of, a lot of things set in the 30s and 40s just don't address that kind of thing. So it just feels like the setting is kind of a window dressing. So it doesn't go into how people live differently. And as it was only, you know, there are people still alive who were around in the 30s, so you know, it's worth not glossing over it because it's people's experiences still. Like there's somebody's grandma out there who went through that and had all these horrible things happen to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's brilliant that you go into that, because to just have it be, as a lot of, especially gangster things, they're so preoccupied with making the men look cool and the women look sexy that they don't go into anything to do with the actual living conditions. It's just like it's an aesthetic rather than a setting.
Yeah, but of course, but these people were real people. So I'm not giving anything away because it's actually in the press release, the big press release. But the character called Queenie in the book was based on my great-grandma, and she was one of 13 children, and she was born in Aldbury, and she was born on a canal barge. So her family hauled coal into Birmingham and out into the coal fields and back again. That was her early life. But she married my great-granddad just after the First World War, and he ran he was a bookies runner, if you know what a bookies runner is. At first, do you know what a bookies runner is? So gambling was illegal.
Oh, okay.
So effectively, he was an illegal bookie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So effectively, he might place bets on racetracks and things on behalf of his community.
Oh,
but effectively, it was illegal bookmaking.
Yeah.
And other things, other criminal activities in 1920s, 30s Midlands. But, and he died young because he was gassed during World War One. So he died young, and my great grandma took over that business.
Oh, right.
I am not kidding you. She really did. Now, I remember her, well, I don't remember her because I was a baby when she died, but there's lots of stories about her in the family told by my grandmother, who was her daughter-in-law, the wife of the heavyweight boxer, my granddad. You can see how boxing, criminality, you know, the Midlands urban environment. And the stories I heard about her were of that kind of working class nana. Oh, if you were ever in trouble, you go to Pam, her name was Pam. Oh, she was brilliant, she'd sort anything out, she'd sort anybody out. Oh, she made great gravy, everybody remembers her Sunday dinners and all of that. One of those working class women who was absolutely spotless, you know, prided herself on the absolute spotlessness of her net curtains and stuff. And it wasn't until, because it was a little bit of a family skeleton, I suppose, it wasn't until I was in my teens that I actually knew the reality of the situation. And she'd been in prison twice. You know. So, oftentimes when I think about criminality, I think about working class people in those days falling into a way of life that kind of sustained them. You know, that it was a way of earning money.
Yeah, if you lost your job then, you're in a lot more trouble than if you lose your job now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think they were buying massive houses and things. I know that they owned a whole street of terrace houses.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But there wasn't particularly an awful lot of wealth or whatever, but it was just a way that they sustained themselves. I'm not excusing their criminality in any way, but I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to think where it came from. And I'm thinking those really extreme circumstances of the early 20th century when, you know, if your child has TB, can you afford the doctor?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, what would you do if your child had tuberculosis and
No
you needed,
NHS then.
and no NHS, and you needed to pay for that doctor? I'm pretty sure that I would go to extreme measures.
Yeah.
And I was trying to sort of empathise with that.
Yeah.
I suppose it must help you to humanise that sort of
Yeah, humanise,
character
empathise.
when you know.
I'm very interested in people. I think most writers are.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make my people real, you know, and I drew on that history because of that. Yeah.
So were you able to take stories about your family and sort of weave them in and sneakily?
Sneakily, is there anything in there? There's not really, no. It's just like the voice.
Yeah.
So that, so Queenie's voice is, oh my goodness, I channeled it. I wasn't planning to write that character.
Oh really?
She just appeared. It was like I might as well have been having some kind of seance. She just appeared, and her voice is my grandmother's voice. That kind of sharp, you know, do as you're told, behave yourself, say it like it is. Yeah, that was her voice.
How do you feel about the Peaky Blinders kind of that glamorises it, like massively?
No.
You know, it's very complicated because it does humanise them in a
is.
way. It does have it has the post-war trauma. But also it makes them look incredibly cool to the point where people get tattoos that go on their arms. And, you know,
So I watched the first series.
Yeah.
You've got to bear in mind I started writing Needless Sally in 2016.
Yeah.
So I watched the first series and thought, oh crikey, I don't think I can watch any more of this. But my mum watched it all. My mum and dad watched it all. They're massive fans. And my mum was like, it's like family history. It's like family history. And I was like, Mum, we were never that good looking. We were never that clever, and we were never that cool.
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee we were never those things. But it put Birmingham on the map a bit, didn't it? You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And who doesn't like Cillian Murphy on the horse and Nick Cave,
Yeah.
Red Right Hand? It's just so stylish.
Yeah.
I don't think Need a Sally is anywhere near as stylish. It's not a stylish sort of novel.
It feels more grounded and gritty and
It's
painful.
Yes, because there's an American called Gary Trevisi who's a writer on hard-boiled, and he believes American hard-boiled fiction is social realism.
Okay.
Chandler said the hard-boiled guys brought crime back to the streets, back where it belonged.
Oh,
You know, crime does not, as much as I am a fan of Golden Age 1930s crime fiction of the
Right.
UK, crime does not belong in the drawing rooms of the aristocracy.
Right.
Right.
You know, it belongs on the mean, what he called the mean streets.
Yeah.
And Dashiell Hammett was the first to do that. He brought crime back onto the streets, and he gave it that kind of realistic dialogue. So that hard-boiled mean streets dialogue,
Yeah.
very sharp. That when we think of that in terms of a kind of 1940s film noir pastiche of what a tough guy dialogue is. But when you actually read the dialogue these guys wrote, it's socially realistic working class dialogue.
Right.
And even though I'm not from Hammett's San Francisco, if only,
Yeah.
I recognise those speech patterns.
Mhm.
So John le Carre, great spy writer,
Yeah.
said in a very early Smiley novel that the way those guys at the circus spoke, the
Yeah.
spies at the circus, the posh boys at the circus spoke, was like a fan dance. Like they were just unveiling little
Yeah.
bits of meaning. Yeah. And then in a later Smiley novel, Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Alec Lima says, I do not communicate that way. He says it to Control. When he's kind of doing that, you know, when they talk in spy novels, when you think, actually, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to say here. It's they're kind of talking around the subject.
Mhm.
Well, Alec Lemus went, I do not communicate in that way to Control, and Control had to say. And I think working class people are more direct. They're more, I think, very creative in, and I hate that word, banter. You know. And it's almost like poetry,
Yeah.
the way working class people convey meaning to one another. And I absolutely love it. I love that.
Good, well-placed swear words.
Absolutely.
Communicates a lot.
It does. And for me, that's the kind of, when I was writing that, it took me right back to my childhood, and it was like a little, it was like a TARDIS, thinking about the way those people taught. And you know, I'm from a big working class family, so still do talk. So yeah, it's social realism.
Yeah. I love that. They all have this sort of grim, horrible worldview. You don't really modern stuff. When you have detectives in modern stuff, they always invent some tragedy for them. Their wife has always died, pretty much. You know, so they're missing that kind of social element of, you know, these fellas have all come back from the war, and every single one of them has got undiagnosed PTSD. So they have to invent something like the wife is dead, or they're divorced, or they're an alcoholic for some reason.
Yeah.
So it always feels a little more.
Yeah. Perhaps that's why I write historical stuff, you know, because it's there for me. It's there for me to mine, you know, these tragedies and traumas and resilience, human resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah, human resilience.
Did you have to do a lot of research in terms of the place? Because it comes across really well in the book, to the point where my wife is from Birmingham, and she would run in every time she'd spot a place that she loved, and she's like, oh, she's writing about the tea rooms at the art gallery, I have to take her. There's a part where you talk about, I think it's the fella who owns Baddesley Clinton,
Oh, you do. Some people
we're big-
spot that and some people
we're
don't.
massive
Yes.
National Trust
Yes.
fans.
Yes.
That's my wife's favourite National Trust place in the country.
You and I, you,
So
yeah.
she
we
spotted
get
that
on.
and she was like, "Oh my God,
Yes.
she's already about Madison Clinton."
Yes.
In like a quite an obscure way, where it's like the story of
Just hinting.
the story
Yeah.
of the man. 'Cause there was the murder of Baddesley Clinton,
Oh.
which is brilliant. I think you can still see the bloodstain on the floor,
You can. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is brilliant.
Highly recommended. National Trust to come to it.
It's got a moat. It's amazing.
It's it's an amazing place.
So did a lot of it come from pre-existing passion for the places that you
Yes.
write about?
Yeah.
It must be hard because a lot of Birmingham was blown to bits in
It was.
World War II, wasn't it?
Yes.
So is
Yeah.
a lot of it not
Well,
totally there anymore.
gosh, that's the pleasure for me. I could research a book.
Yeah.
Give me 10 years and I'll thoroughly research that book for you. It's such a pleasure. A lot of the stuff I knew already because I like to walk, and I'm a big canal girl. You know, I love the canals. So a lot of the stuff I kind of knew. I kind of knew where he was, if that makes sense. And then I started to research. I was on the National Newspaper Archive a lot, and just looking at what was going on in Birmingham in 1933. But the best resource really were the advertisements.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, you know, little cafes, hairdressers, pubs, but also what was advertised in terms of convenience foods. So obviously Bird's Custard and Thai food tea, but Brill Cream was a Birmingham product as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, these things were just absolutely fascinating, and I'd fall down one rabbit hole and then another rabbit hole, and I would say that 95% of the stuff I've researched is not in the book.
Oh, right.
But it was just an absolute pleasure to get into that. There's also lots of lovely BFI films on YouTube of Birmingham and the whole of the Midlands
Oh, right.
from the 30s.
Yeah.
Particularly when Birmingham was trying to sell itself as a maker of cars, etc., etc., and you know, bikes and all
The
of
factory for
that's it. Was it 1,000 trades or something? 10,000 trades. So it was trying to sell itself, and those were fantastic resources because I could see the traffic and how that worked on New Street.
Wow.
I could also see what people were wearing.
Yeah.
But 30s fashion, that's a kind of pet love of mine.
Oh, really?
And I'm a massive film fan, a huge film nerd. So 30s fashion and things like that, I'm absolutely you know, I can nerd out on that stuff.
Were you watching lots of films from, like, Hollywood-made films from the 30s, or were you watching films that were sort of set there after the fact?
I'm a fan of something called pre-code.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Before all of the Hollywood rules of
you
can't wear that.
That's it. So those lovely violent gangster films from the early 30s.
Scarface and things
Scarface,
like that.
yeah. But also Busby Berkeley musicals. So there's a film star called Dick Powell that William has dreams about in my novel, and he was the first screen Philip Marlowe. But before that, he was like a crooner in the 1930s. He had a beautiful high tenor voice, and he was in things like Gold Diggers of 1933 and stuff, playing the young romantic hero.
Oh, right.
And when he hit his 40s, he wanted to change, and he became a 40s film noir tough guy. And I was like, I'm obsessed with Dick Powell. I'm obsessed with Dick Powell. So I don't know what came over me, but my detective has vaguely erotic dreams about him. So I get such a lot of information from my love of film, including the slightly weird elements of the novel.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I saw you did a post which was like a walking tour of Birmingham with all of the places from the novel in.
Yes.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm giving too much away, but I'll be at the Birmingham Literary Festival doing something very similar. So
great
yeah,
stuff.
So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun.
What made you pick Needless Alley particularly?
I'd love to say, yeah, I've been obsessed with Nita Sally and its history and its name for the past 30 years, but that's an absolute lie. I was halfway through the novel, and I knew that William had an office in central Birmingham, probably Cannon Street. And I was with my girls in the Starbucks opposite the Tesco Express.
My wife was reading the book and you were talking about where his office was, and she was like, that's by the Starbies.
Yes,
Did she say?
And I was looking out of the window, and I said to I think I had both of them there, and I said to Freya, I said, ooh, do you think Nita Sally is a good title for a book? And she went, oh, yes, Mum, do it. So he went from Cannon Street to Nita Sally because such a great name for a book. And Nita Sally does have a fantastic history. Once I put him there, oh boy, I fell down some research rabbit holes about Nita Sally, amazing.
So tell me about it, because when I said to my husband, I said from Hale's Own, I said, so it's called Nita Sally, and he said, oh, so it's set in Birmingham. So
Yes.
he knew, even though he's
yeah.
not from Sunshine.
Yeah.
Well, what would he know? Why would he know it?
Oh, okay. So there's lots of theories about why it's called Nita Sally.
Mhm.
The first one is to do with like Birmingham's metal trades.
Mhm.
It's probably Needles Alley,
Oh.
and they made needles there. It's also one of the oldest streets in Birmingham.
Okay.
It's more than likely early medieval in date. Another reason why they think it's called Needless Alley is because it has a reputation for being really seedy. So in the early Victorian period, in the late Georgian period, it was the place where all the women of the night hung out. I did write a little bit for the Times, which makes me sound very grand, but I'm not at all, about a place called the Grand Sultan Divan, and that was in Nita Sally, and it was a coffee shop, dancing hall, Victorian dancing hall, cum knocking shop there, and there was a massive robbery there. The guy who owned it married a brothel keeper from Liverpool. She came to the marriage with like £30,000, which is not a lot of money, hard-earned money. And the marriage was going sour. She wanted her money back. She wanted to leave him, but he wouldn't let her have her money back because of the marital laws. It was his money. So she basically drugged his brandy, robbed his safe, and ran off with her fancy man. And it was a massive scandal. It wasn't just in Birmingham, the scandal. It was like in all of the national newspapers. And the upshot is the fancy man got arrested for theft, but the wife didn't, because of the marital laws, the strange marital laws. You technically can't steal from your husband.
She's done it.
I know. When I read that, this was originally in Nita Sally. William was telling you this story about Nita Sally and its seedy reputation, and I had to cut it. Because it was just too much backstory. But I've been like, oh boy, I'd love to write that story of the Grand Sultan Divan and what went on. Because so he had this beautiful seedy reputation, and the punchline to it is when he sold up, he was bankrupted. The guy who owned it, when he sold up to the YMCA. So it became the YMCA building in Birmingham for a very long time.
Whereabouts is it?
Do you know? I don't know. I've been trying to find it, but it would have been absolutely massive. It was a really big building. But Nita Sally. Oh, Nita Sally. If you go up New Street towards the museum, towards the Beamer, it's on the right-hand side, and it takes you up to Temple Row and the church and the cathedral.
My wife was reading the book, and William was leaving his office, and she was like, "It's going a weird way." And she was just like, "Oh, it's because he wants to have a look at all the fancy things and see all the cool stuff."
Well, it's because Natalie wanted to take him on a little journey through the house.
That was one of those moments where she ran into the kitchen and was like, "Look, I know where this is."
Yeah, I do that a lot. I take him on very odd routes.
Yeah.
Because I fall in love with places and I want to write about them.
So have you got lots of other places you want to squeeze into the second book?
Yes. So the second book is actually a little bit different in the sense that it's only in one place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's more claustrophobic than Nita Sally because he doesn't.
Interesting.
Yeah. His he ends up in a country house environment.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to say Battersea Clinton, but he ends up in a country house environment, stranded with Phil, investigating an intruder in this country house. So the country house is actually being used as a treatment centre for men with PTSD and alcoholic disorders, and that's based on a real place I know. And he becomes stranded there in a flood, and all manner of dark shenanigans go on. But it's very much centred in that place, in the one place. Yeah. But I think in the third one, I'm back in Birmingham. Yeah.
How many do you have planned out?
Well, my trouble is never thinking of stories, it's thinking which one's the right story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you sort of come up with, like the first one, did you come up with the idea to write something in Birmingham first, or did you come up, was it sort of genre first or setting first?
That's really interesting.
Because you obviously love the genre as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with the genre. The genre is my genre, it's my reading genre. I'm a reader rather than a writer.
Yeah.
I really am. What did I come up with the setting first? Do you know, I don't think I did. For a while, I toyed with Coventry. Don't tell anybody from Birmingham. You can edit this out. For a while, I toyed with Coventry because I love the whole idea of Coventry as this beautiful medieval city in the 1930s. No offence, Coventry, but this beautiful medieval city. You know, the jewel in Warwickshire's crown. It was called.
And that was bombed to heck as well.
Yeah, bombed to pieces.
I've seen interviews with Lee Childs from Coventry,
yes,
and he said it's just rubble. He just grew up in rubble.
Rubble, yeah, absolutely. And so I did toy with Coventry, but then I thought, no, I needed somewhere bigger. I needed a bigger, because when you write noir, you need to have that kind of high-low dynamic. You need to be able to be in the kind of the back streets and the alleyways, but then you need to really think about how the higher echelons. This makes me sound like this makes me sound very modern, but this is what Chandler said. This is what Hammett said. These levels of exploitation with the sort of the higher ups. That's what noir is. You know, it's questioning what's crime and who's the bigger criminal. Right. The gangster beating up the bloke who didn't pay his bookies fees, or the mine owner who lets 45 men burn to death because it's easier than trying to rescue them. You know, and these are not my ideas. This is what Hammett was doing. And this is what Chandler said in The Simple Art of Murder, which is his massive essay on how to write crime fiction. Boy, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's brilliant and informative, and I'm such a Raymond girl. Yeah. Love Raymond Chandler. But yeah, so when you write noir, you're really thinking about these high-low dynamics, and I think you need a big city for that. Yeah. And Birmingham is perfect for that. Yeah, perfect.
It's got the same sort of quality as like a New York or somewhere.
Absolutely. Chicago.
Right.
You know. Yeah. What is Birmingham but Britain's Chicago? Yeah.
How did you find the pressure to get things? Did you find there was much pressure on yourself to get things accurate and historically spot on? Because I imagine there's a bit of a tension between wanting to be entertaining and get to the meat of the story quick, and wanting to put in loads of backstory, as you were saying, because it's interesting and this is your chance. You're talking about it. You're there. Why don't you just put all the backstory in?
Oh yeah. In terms of backstory and what I'd learned, I had to really rein my neck in.
Yeah. Is that something you had to go at with a red pen a few times?
Yes. Yeah. And I work in a really awful way. So my writing process is, don't try this at home, it's awful. But it meant that I had to kill an awful lot of darlings. An awful lot, just beat them to death with a claw hammer. Really, really murder them. And it was painful to do that, but it made for an easier read. You know, you have to write for pleasure. but then you have to edit knowing that you have to edit for your reader's pleasure. And that's something I really had to do.
Yeah.
In terms of accuracy, I'm such a nerd that accuracy is like, and also my husband's a nerd, so throughout the text I was calling Williams Webley a gun, and Andy was like, actually I think you'll find it's a sidearm, a revolver or a pistol. He doesn't speak like that, honestly. Oh God, don't watch this, Andy. Edit that out. But yeah, but so my husband was like giving me all of this, like, you know, he's a big, he's like, oh, Dr. Watson had a Webley, I think. So, you know, and the guys in the First World War, they would have had Webleys. It was army issue. And he told me all about that. So he was like reading for these details as well.
Right. I've heard about that stuff before, so I've written stuff that's set in World War II and that sort of thing. I'm like, do they call it a weapon or a rifle or a gun?
I know.
It's hard, that's stuff you don't really think about until you put the word in and you're like, I don't know the answer to this one.
I'll tell you what I think I did do that was perhaps modern, and that was the swearing, the effing and jeffing. And I swore because I'm not a big swearer myself, but it felt realistic to the character. But I was remembering the first time I heard my dad say the F word, and I swear I was in my mid-20s. Like I was actually in his workshop. He's an upholsterer, trimmer and fitter. So I was scrounging fabric because I'm a sewer as well, and I was on the scrounge for fabric, and he was effing and jeffing at all of the blokes he was working with, and I was like, oh, and the blokes went, hey up, chill. Because I was a woman in the workshop. And I think, I'm not too sure I ever heard my grandfather say the F word. He would have said bloody hell and things in front of women.
So it was like a little cut off, like, you know,
I think basically he would have, in front of men, definitely, but not in front of women, and I don't think I got that quite right. I know, and when I was doing it I thought, that's not quite right, Natalie, but I did it anyway because it seemed right for the character. So it was a massive compromise between the modern readership and what perhaps would have been absolutely accurate. But yeah, I've not talked about that before, but that niggles me a little bit that I did that.
I did not notice at all. I wasn't sitting there going...
Perhaps, perhaps it's because I'm not much of a swearer. The swearing really jumped out at me.
You deal with a lot of very grim topics in the book. As grim as you can get, basically. Did you have to, when you were publishing, sending it to the publisher, did you have to do anything along the lines of tread carefully around certain things, or not in a, not in a like, you can't say this, that and the other, but in a, this is a sensitive topic.
Yes, okay, I do get that.
How do you approach that sort of thing? Because it's just, I've never done it myself, written about that sort of thing, but it seems like there would be an extra pressure on you.
No, it was, no, there wasn't. In absolute honesty, because my editor is a specialist crime editor. Oh, okay. So it was water off a duck's back. So I sort of said to her, I look like I'm a member of the WI, but I'm writing really hard stuff, and I get a lot of jokes like, oh, it's always the quiet ones. But she was like, no problem, absolutely no problem whatsoever. Have you ever heard of a writer called Derek Raymond? He's a Brit noir writer from the 1980s. Yeah. My stuff is nothing like Derek Raymond's. I'm gritty, but blooming heck. Above and beyond. Yeah, absolutely. So noir readers tend to be more accommodating. Right. And when I've included the grittier stuff, it's never to be salacious. Yeah. Right. This is not, me being salacious.
I've seen that in films a lot, where they have things where it drives me crazy, where they use sexual assault as like a character building scene. Yeah. Things like Go Over Dragon Tattoo and that sort of thing. It's just
I don't want to talk about how I feel about that. I really don't.
But yeah, you feel it in your book, which is different. Like it doesn't feel like.
These are the realities. You know, those men were traumatised by war, but what were their women traumatised by?
Right.
And those are the realities of that life, you know. And women's lives now. You know, you reach a certain age where, you know, you sit in a room with a bunch of women, oh yeah, that happened to me. You get to a certain age where, oh, you know, this is normal.
Yeah.
Not as extreme as what's going on in Needless Sally. But I'm going to come out and say that what's in Needless Sally is nowhere near as bad as what's going on right now, probably in Redditch. I pull back from all sorts of things I could have said and shown. And that because it's gritty enough, because you know it's gritty enough as it is. But the reality of a lot of people's situations, young women's situations, is far more exploitative and sad and traumatising than I could write. What crime does, I think, P.D. James said that crime gives readers justice and order in a world that doesn't seem very just or ordered. And that's what I've tried to do in Needless Sally, even though it's gritty and a bit full on. I've tried for there to be a sense of justice there and order, even though it's a kind of what happens is chaotic and traumatic.
Yeah. No, that totally came across as well. I'm a big horror fiend, and I love slasher films, to my shame. But a lot of the writing around slasher films is the same kind of thing of, you know, you've got a maniac, it's always a man, running around, killing everyone, and then it's terrifying, and then at the end you get this closure where that person is killed off. But obviously slasher films are a lot more troublesome because they like revel in the murder and bring the bad guy back to murder more people for another 10 films. So it's a very different.
If you're really into genre, you know, noir and horror, if you're really into this stuff, there has to be a reason why we enjoy it. Because it has to be enjoyable. I mean, the part of crime writing is solving the mystery, but I think it's more to do. Well, this is from my reading rather than my writing. For me, it's about the journey these characters have in extreme circumstances, and of course, slasher films are like that. This is an extreme circumstance that these characters are under, and it's kind of thrilling to watch that journey. But of course, you have to temper that. Well, for me, I have to temper that with realism.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find being a horror fan, and is you always have to kind of, like, it's okay to love a thing and admit that it's also horrible and does horrible things, and there are examples of it that are terrible and shouldn't be made, and you know, things like there's no reason anybody should be making Cannibal Holocaust anymore. So you can watch it and appreciate what it was doing, but at the same time saying this is terrible, you should not have done this. Like there are, I think, however much you love a particular thing, especially a genre in entertainment, it's healthy to be upfront about there's lots of problems in this as well.
You're dead right.
A lot of horror academics especially defend horror to the death, and they're like, you know, looking for all the positive things that horror does and refusing all of the negatives. It's very easy to, when you love something, jump to its defense and just be like, yes, I know 20 murders of women were in this film, but it's really feminist because she kills them at the end. It's like, well, you just sat through and watched 20 women be murdered to get to that bit. So is it?
I mean, these things are so. I think these are things that are really complex, aren't they? When we step back from the things that we love, and really think hard about what's going on there. And I don't think it should stop us loving them, because I think there's enough in. I mean, because I think there's enough healthy analysis when we kind of watch, a terrible horror film, or we're reading a particularly violent crime novel. There's, we're intelligent people, aren't we? And we can step back from that and kind of analyse. But then you've got fans who will always defend you know, their particular favourite
But I
writer or
thought that was
filmmaker.
one of the things I loved about your book is that it gets the pain of the characters across really well in a way that a lot of murder mysteries don't. It gets across the kind of the torment they go through.
Yeah.
And,
One of the reasons why the murder doesn't happen until about 30,000 words in is because I wanted to give the victim, for the victim to be an actual person.
Yeah. You should have seen my wife's face when she got to that bit. I knew it was coming. I was watching her read it.
I wanted her to be a person, and I wanted my readers to feel for her and understand her, and then feel for the people who've lost us grief. I wanted that to feel real. I didn't want her just to be a plot device.
Yeah, it's very.
I didn't
rare.
want my dead woman to be a plot device.
Yeah, it's very rare in especially films when you feel something for a victim, especially in a murder mystery, because quite often they're dead within 5 minutes. You know. Yeah, I thought that came across really well.
Thank you. Thanks.
I've got this thing about how in novels often it's almost pornographic, the violence against women. I mean, I read one Jo Nesbø, The Snowman. I couldn't read any more. You know, it was almost there for the sake of it.
And I think that's really, really important. Gosh, if Nita Sally is about anything, it's about violence against women in all its forms. And I don't shy away from it. So there's pornography. There's actual pornographic scenes in Nita Sally, because that's part of women's lives. You know, women serve that industry, and men consume that industry without thought. And I wanted people to question that a little bit. I wanted to question how that industry feeds into further exploitations of women. I wanted to think about what female trafficking actually is. You know, what is female trafficking, and how female trafficking of women and girls affects women who haven't been trafficked, who haven't been exploited in that way, because this is our culture. Our culture tacitly allows this, because it's going on. As much as we can get upset about Epstein and Savile, it exists right now.
It's been industrialised, hasn't it?
It's industrialised.
Internet websites and things.
Oh my goodness, my goodness me. And I've never spoken about this before because it's never actually come up. Because when I've done these things before, it's always been about the kind of the hard-boiled nature of the novel. I'm a woman who writes hard-boiled fiction, etc., etc. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised it's never come up before. You're the first person to actually even touch on it. So I do not pull my punches.
Right.
Because if you're going to be confronted with this, I want you to be confronted with what I think is a little bit of the truth of the situation. And I do not want to glamorise it.
Right, but it's not in order to entertain.
No.
It's in order
It's
to
in order
pursue your
to-
message.
And understand my characters and the lives they
You
live.
don't want people, these blokes in the books, to get away with it.
No.
Oh no.
So you want an ending, you know,
Yes.
somehow.
Yeah.
Where
No.
they
Well, I don't want to give away any
No.
spoilers, but
No.
and it's not a kind of one of those female fantasies where you know, she goes around with a gun and she just kills every rapist she
Right.
can find. But ultimately, the perpetrators of this violence against women get their comeuppance. I also very much play with William in this as well. William's job is effectively exploitative.
I was going to ask you how you,
Yes.
if you thought he was a moral
Yeah.
man.
He's a moral man or not.
Yeah, because
very
is it
complicated.
does he only have male clients? You said that he was trying to take photographs of the
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
But he never has women who want photographs of their
The
husband.
rules for divorcing your husband were different. You had to also prove adultery, but also brutality, and prove it
Adultery wasn't enough.
wasn't enough.
Oh,
And that's why the novel's set in 33, because the divorce laws changed about 36
Oh.
to equalise slightly. But before that,
Oh
you
my
had to
God.
prove brutality as well if you were a woman. So with William, I what I wanted William to be was a normal bloke.
Yeah.
I didn't want a hero.
Right.
I wanted him to be a normal bloke, and a normal bloke who has to actually start to question his relationships with women a little bit, because I love. Oh, this makes me sound really weird. I love men. You know, I'm very happily married. You know, I've got a great dad, great grandparents, wonderful father-in-law. You know, my relationships with men have been largely positive. My main hobbies are walking the canals and collecting and restoring antique sewing machines. So I've got a lot of male friends. But good men can be tacitly complicit with poor attitudes towards women. Because obviously they've been brought up within our culture, which can be exploitative and hard towards women. So I wanted William not to be a hero and to go, you know, I would never do this, I would never do that, you know, but to be the kind of man who was like, oh, I hadn't thought that that could happen to a woman. You know, I hadn't thought that perhaps my attitudes to women were perhaps harming them.
I've had these exact conversations with my wife Jo. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, where she said, like, you're a good bloke, obviously. I love you. I've married you, so I must think you're a good bloke. But even you are clueless on certain things.
Yes.
Like, you know, you can try as hard as you want. There are just some things that men will not see. Because they've not, you know.
Yeah, and I wanted to explore that a bit. And I explored it not because I'm kind of a man hater or whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to explore it because I actually like men. I wanted to see how, you know, what they would do in these circumstances. A good man in bad circumstances who has to really think about what he's done in the past.
It's so much more interesting than just having a main character who's flawless and all of his attitudes are brilliant, all of his actions are like spot on. That's
never met anybody like that, though, have you?
No.
You know,
that's not really a person, is it? It's just like
not a person.
Like an avatar in a video game.
Yeah, and I didn't want that. I wanted, you know, when you start to write a novel, it may be your last, and it may never get published. So, you know, you want to do your very best with that first one. You know, and the second one. But I wanted to just make it as realistic and as of me as I could, I suppose.
Yeah. Would you like to do a quick reading from the book?
Yeah, is there a particular bit? Or just the beginning?
Yeah, the beginning would be great. And then afterwards I'll ask you about the writing process and that sort of thing.
So I won't read too long. Go on. Perhaps just the first paragraph, the first couple of paragraphs. So Birmingham, Sunday 4th of June 1933. William's footsteps sounded heavy on the bare linoleum. The lighting in the corridor was poor. A single bulb covered by a pink glass shade dangled unlit from the ceiling rose. There was a faint smell of disinfectant, and a large vase of silk carnations stood dusty on a console table under a mirror advertising pale ale. The tinny buzz of a wireless played behind closed doors, hummed in the background and pricked at William's nerves. Sweat trickled down his collar in rivulets, pooling at the base of his spine, and his camera, prized, weighty, metallic, bagged out his jacket pocket and was awkward against his hip. Room 10 was at the end of the hallway and close to the window. William looked outside. Her street was Sabbath quiet. That part of the city was red with Warwickshire clay, the bricks of the buildings warm with it, drapers, bicycle shops, insurance offices, all with Victorian frontages, a touch soiled with soot. An empty tram swayed past, creating clouds of hot dust in its wake, and across the road, modern signage flickered Ansell's and electric blue on the hard tan tile of the Cross Keys pub. William glanced at his watch and waited in silence for the minute of the o'clock. This was well planned, all solid and tactical, but the job gave him the wind up always, and so his stomach lurched and fell heavy into his bowels as he unlocked the door. The fob swung like a pendulum, and he watched it spin until it steadied, and then he entered the room. Lace curtains trembled against the open casement window like a bird's wing. The couple were perfectly framed. The woman had not been given roses, but gladioli. Their long stems, pink-tipped in bud, were strewn across the counterpane. She was wide-eyed. Her pretty open mouth formed a near-perfect O. Lipstick smeared red across her left cheek, and in the late afternoon light, a halo of dust motes danced above her soft, pale curls. William heard nothing but the perfect click-whir of his camera. He wound the film on. On the floor, kneeling in silk knickers, her stockings half-masked around dimpled, rounded thighs, the blonde looked towards William and let out a low, guttural moan.
Thank you. Yeah. So I heard one of the. So when women were divorced back in that time, they lost their children essentially.
Yes.
Which is horrific.
Yeah.
But that was something that really came across in the novel was just moments like that when you could see that person has realised their entire life is done.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is
And that's a pivotal
horrendous.
moment, really, for William.
Yeah. Excuse me. Could you talk a little bit about how you got started writing the novel? Have you always wanted to write novels?
No, it never occurred to me that I should write a book ever. I was, like I said, I was a massive reader, but I was never one of those children who wanted to write stories. I was always one of those children who wanted to draw pictures. So it was never a childhood dream or anything like that. I was a very young mum, and my eldest went to university, and I kind of wanted another baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said to my husband, I'd love a little boy. And he was like, no. He said, you know, we're young, we had our babies young. He said, why don't you, Are you okay?
Sorry.
He said, we've got all of our 40s ahead of us. Why don't you go and do something that you really kind of fancy doing? And I absolutely loved my degree, my undergraduate degree. I've got an English degree, English and American Studies degree actually, hence the film Marlow. But you know, I was a little bit too scared to go back and do a literature MA. I thought it might be a bit too heavy on the academic theory because I hadn't done it for so long. And I thought, what's a really great way of exploring my love of books? So I did a creative writing MA. And in I don't know what moment of hubris made me do this, but I applied to the University of East Anglia. So I have my MA from the University of East Anglia's prestigious writing MA. And it was brilliant, it was life-changing. Not because, you know, I got published, because that was a slog. That was a massive slog. It was brilliant because I got to meet reading friends. Everybody on there was a massive reader and a lover of books. And it was so nice just to nerd out, talk about books, talk about our writing and not feel silly. Yeah. And I made lifelong friends in that course. And so that was absolutely liberating and life-changing. And it also, as a middle-aged woman, you know, an early empty nester perhaps, I felt all of a sudden like, actually, boom, you know, my life isn't necessarily downhill from now on. Boom, I can do something else, I've done something else. So it was absolutely life-changing. So Needless Alley is a response to the fiction I love. It's an exploration of the fiction I love. In matter of fact, it was quite a rigorous course, and I did have to do I think it was a 20,000 word literature essay anyway to accompany the novel, and that was the Hammett stuff I did.
To talk about your influences and
it was actually a literary exploration of Hammett's work, but yes, it was absolutely life-changing, that course, and that's why I wrote the book. Yeah. Because I had to, because it was a function of the MA.
Right. What a brilliant advert for that MA. Your book is now published with a massive publisher.
Yeah.
That's great.
yeah, it's a remarkable thing to happen, and I'm still kind of processing it. It's still quite strange to process.
Yeah.
Did it come with, were you in sort of giving feedback to each other?
Yes, it was a workshopping situation, which toughens you up.
Yeah, Alison was talking about this when we talked a couple of weeks ago, because I write myself, but I just show it to my wife and my father-in-law. And she was like, "You've got to get it in front of other people. It doesn't count."
Yeah.
So you're a big fan of just giving it to everyone and
just letting
just
them have
getting
at
eyes on
it. Letting them have at it. I have this theory, which I stole from Angela Carter. So if you really agree with it, don't think it's my clever idea. But when you read a book, you're rewriting the book. Because what you're doing is you're bringing your own experiences, your own likes and dislikes, how you're feeling emotionally on that particular day to that text.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to get your work out there, to see how other people write your book.
Right. Yeah.
Because what you're necessarily intending to convey is not necessarily what could be conveyed to the majority.
Yeah.
Good readers can give you good ideas as well. Also, there is a kind of weird thing, and if you're writing, you know this, that what you want in your head is difficult to get onto the page.
Yeah.
And workshopping helps so much with that. Some writers don't like workshopping, but I really do.
Yeah.
I do, and some of the people I met in my MA, we get together and we swap each other's.
I love that, because I'm not a fan of I think Stephen King said it, I love him, but he said that, like, he was being poetic at the time, but that reading is like psychic communication, and the author is just speaking straight to you, and that doesn't take into account where you are, what you're doing, where you are in your life. I did some research on The Exorcist, which was fun because it was talking about talking to people who watched it when they were the age of the girl in the film who was possessed, versus when they watched it when they were the age of the parent.
That's
And
fascinating.
it's a completely different film,
Yeah.
depending on what age you are.
Absolutely.
So I love that idea of them rewriting the book.
Yeah, and I think it's a very intimate relationship actually between reader and writer. And I suppose I come from my writing from a point of view as a reader. I always say I'm a reader, and workshopping helps you explore how other readers view your work. Yeah.
Do you find writing therapeutic at all? 'Cause it's
Can be. Mostly it's really hard.
yeah.
It can be. There are moments where you're like, so writing Needless Sally was cheaper than therapy.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of anger. I got a lot of stuff that was on my blooming plate, into that book. I got it off my chest. And a lot of things I was interested in. I did a presentation actually on my MA about men, about how I was really fascinated by men. Always fascinated by men. So I was, not men, but male characters. That makes me sound like a massive pervert. But male characters and how they're presented. And I used to, when I was a teenage girl, I used to read crime fiction to see what men were like. Weirdly. Yeah, isn't that weird? And so that is a kind of an exploration of these kind of childhood thoughts and feelings I have, not only about the genre, but about what it is to be a woman as well, and kind of how you figure out men. Cheaper than therapy.
Yeah, and you don't have to write an autobiography for it to be
Absolutely
about
not.
yourself. You can have little bits of yourself creep in.
That's it. Yeah, it's like they're my imaginary friends, and I'm just letting them work out some of my stuff for me. In a very extreme way. I live a very, very, very quiet life, but in an extreme way. So it's cheaper than therapy. But then I sit down and I get stage fright when I write.
Alison's got a brilliant
stage
technique
fright.
for
I
getting
have a
over
workshop
that.
for you.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yes, please. But I get horrible stage fright. I mean, gut churning.
Wow.
Stage fright when I write. After a while, it eases. And sometimes very rarely I hit that sweet spot where I'm like, yeah, this is the sweet writing moment. But mostly it's a.
I just write while telling myself that it's rubbish and I hate myself. And
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I hate it. And I'm rubbish, and I hate myself. And why am I doing this? And I should have gone back to teaching. Yeah, those are the thoughts and feelings.
Alison uses improv comedy, don't you?
No. Yeah, perhaps I need it. I need something like that just to get myself out of my own head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did you find first starting out? Did you start with smaller pieces or did you jump straight?
Went straight. Needless to say, it's the first
Really?
thing I've ever written. I went straight into a novel like a complete idiot.
That's incredible.
It's so unusual.
So how did you feel when you were first presenting bits of it to other people? Because it can feel, because it's such there's no barrier between you and the person reading it. You know, if you make a film, you can be like, oh, my camera was rubbish, my actors look very good.
Yeah.
It's like,
And my laptop is really old and
Yeah,
rubbish.
this
That's
is
why my
literally-
writing is really old and rubbish.
Yeah. So
No,
how did it feel to hand that
gosh.
over? Because it can feel a bit like
Daunting.
handing over a piece of your soul and being like, what do you think? Like,
Okay,
it's hard
gosh.
to...
I was alright with it.
Yeah?
And it's not necessarily because I was very self-confident about the work, it's because I wasn't self-confident about
Oh,
the
okay.
work.
Because you were sitting there typing it going, I hate myself.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
so I was alright with it. I felt very nervous about going down to Norwich and becoming part of that kind of community because it was out of my comfort zone. But when the workshopping actually happened, they were all, I was blessed really with a good group.
It was a safe space, right?
It's a very safe space.
Mm.
And everybody was really good.
Mm.
So there's a difference between, as I often say this to my students, I say, you know, it's not necessarily about whether you like it or whether you don't like it. That's absolutely immaterial. You know, what is the writer trying to do here? What is the writer trying to construct here? What scene is, what's going on with these characters? And is that working? You know, and everybody on my course instinctively knew that, or were more experienced than me. And just kind of knew how that workshopping worked. So it was actually a very good place to work things through, and very well run as well by the lecturers who were writers themselves, obviously. So that was really worthwhile.
Did everybody have the same sort of intent, like they all wanted to become professional writers?
See, I didn't go intending to be a professional writer.
Oh, right, okay.
No, absolutely not. I was the only one who didn't put my hand up when that question was asked.
Yeah.
Because I didn't genuinely thought, oh, I'm never going to get published.
You were just doing it for...
I was just like, I was doing it because I wanted to explore how these things I've loved so much all my life as solace to me, reading, absolute solace, how these things that have given me so much joy and pleasure all my life were constructed. Now, I come from a literary criticism background because I'm an English teacher, so I know how to analyse a text. But when we do that, we don't think about how it's constructed, the processes of construction, and we don't think necessarily about how to create a paragraph, scene, chapter novel. These larger constructions. We look for themes, we look for narrative point of view, you know, we look for particularly use of language, but we don't look at construction. And I thought, I wonder how that's done. I thought, well, I don't know how that's done unless I try and do it myself. And that's why I went there, because I thought this would be a way of doing it. And I might be the only one who ever did that. So when the kind of tough part of sending it out to agents and editors and things came, I was pretty sanguine because it'd never been my dream.
Right.
So when it was really tough, like, you know, really tough, and it is tough. If you're going to try it, it is tough. I was okay with it because I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, which was get it written, get it edited, see how it's done.
Yeah. Did your background in literary analysis make it harder for you? Because, you know, as a former film student, I know how often academics will read.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll read into things that you're like, you know,
Yeah.
it is all about various bodily parts. And
No,
you know, does
I
that,
think I enjoyed it because of that.
yeah,
Because there are Easter eggs in here that only anybody who's really into Hammett will know, or really into Chandler will know.
Yeah.
That's some sort of like really hardcore analysis of text.
yeah,
It's kind of falling into there. And also if you're a fan of T.S. Eliot as well, there's stuff in there. But you know, you don't have to be a fan of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland to enjoy Needless Alley. But I was like, I'm going to put some Wasteland references in because that's the background I came from. But
so it gave you like an extra tool set to play with rather than
yeah, that was part of the fun.
you weren't writing it being like, oh, a student's going to read this.
Oh yeah, so I never ever thought that anybody would do close analysis of text on Needless Alley. I never had that consciously in my back, you know, that was not in my thought process at all. My thought process was, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
Right.
Let's pop a bit of that in there, and all of the references that I loved to the genre fiction that I love.
Did the book change much from when you, so I presume you got yourself an agent first and then went to the publisher?
Yeah, it massively changed.
Through the agent or through?
Oh gosh, it was a kind of convoluted process. So as a script, an MA script, it did well, but it had. I did that very academic thing where I really reflected the genre I love. And if you know your Chandler or you know your Hammett, those guys wrote for magazines.
Oh, okay.
So they wrote for a magazine called Black Mask primarily. So it was a weekly episodic story, and so there was no overarching plot.
Right.
So Chandler said, if in doubt, get a man to come in and pull a gun out. You know.
Oh, yeah.
And so their plots are very loose,
Right.
particularly Chandler.
Sort of meandering.
Oh yeah, picaresque, episodic, and Needless Alley was very picaresque. You know, poor old William was just battered from one point to the next, to the next, to the next. And in writer's parlance, I pantsed it.
Right. Okay.
Which was really
you
great.
pantsed it.
I did, absolutely.
Because it's so well plotted and so
first draft. So I pantsed and completely pantsed the first draft, which is a great way of getting to know character and setting.
Yeah.
And then at the UEA, because it's editors and agents, they come kind of and have like dues, and you kind of have to have like cocktail parties with warm white wine and things, and chat with ladies with pashminas, and I felt. When in the end of Morecambe and Wise, where Eric Morecambe's got his Mac and his carrier bags, I actually literally had a carrier bag in one of these dues. I thought, and I was sort of standing in the corner like with a carrier bag, and like people were not interested in the novel at all. You know, you could tell which novels had buzz about them, but Needless Alley wasn't one of them. But then we sent off early chapters to agents and stuff, and I was approached by an agent on the back of that. Oh gosh, and one of my favourite contemporary writers this agent represented, and she was really nice to me, really nice, and she asked for what they call a full manuscript, which is the whole of your novel. So if you read the first few chapters, if she likes it, she'll be nice to you, ask for the full. And she completely ghosted me. No, that told me something. It told me A, I could write well enough for her to be interested in the first place. And B, it wasn't up to scratch.
Right.
So I bought something called Save the Cat, screenwriter's book. Yes. And I thought, if Needless Alley was going to be turned into a screenplay, how would I go about doing that? Right. So I thought, let's see what those boys do. And they are boys mostly. I thought, what will those guys do?
This is, for those who haven't read it, it's like a template.
Yes.
Or it basically takes lots of the most successful Hollywood films and says what makes them work, and he basically finds that they all have certain beats that they always hit.
Points of action.
Yeah.
And there are certain points of action in a strong genre narrative.
And the Save the Cat is, if to make your hero likable, have them do something nice in the first 5 minutes, whether it's saving a cat from being run over by the car, or just tipping a waitress. It's like a tiny little thing that all successful Hollywood films do to get you on side with the main character.
So no matter how dodgy William's business is, he paid for Clara's tea in the Lions tea rooms. So
you're like, whatever he does, oh, he's not that bad.
yeah, so I worked with those beats, which sounds really, really cheesy, and Nida Sally's still a literary, the literary end of crime, very much so, but it taught me at no end about what readers and consumers of genre fiction want from a novel, and not to stray too much from these really big important structures actually. So I rewrote it in lockdown.
Oh, right.
So like I said, I don't just kill my darlings, I just batter them to death, because whole chapters, not just scenes, beautifully written, precise chapters that have been workshopped to death.
Right.
Yeah. So would you recommend that as
What say?
Because there's a lot of like understandable criticism of things like Save the Cat and this template format of being like, if you just try and hit all that, it can be formulaic. So would you recommend just writing it first and getting it out and then using that as like a pencil sharpener to kind of...
I think it's a pencil sharpener. Because as much as I use Save the Cat, and I'm using Save the Cat right now actually, because I've done exactly the same thing with my first draft of...
Oh yeah.
As much as I use Save the Cat, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool, it's not a Bible. So you use it to sharpen your story. Because these things, so you know, it's narratology, isn't it? So there's this academic theory, and it's a film theory as well as a literary theory, that there's only a few stories in the entire world. And that's because we as human beings look for patterns, and we look for patterns of behaviours. We also look for archetypes, the mother, the hero.
The Joseph Campbell thing.
That's it. The hero two faces and the archetypes. So as human beings, we look for set patterns in our stories, because life is so chaotic. We want pattern and order in our stories. And I think Save the Cat, or any other book that suits your process and helps you get through, construct a narrative, is very helpful. I just use Save the Cat because I thought screenwriters know their stuff when it comes to narrative.
You don't really need the help as much on the on the what goes in a sentence part.
No,
because I find that's not easier, but it's easier to fix. So if you've got a paragraph that's bad, that you can fix that in an afternoon. If you've got a story structure that is well off,
you need a pandemic. And oftentimes I think certain writers have a natural ability. And structure is not my natural ability. It might be that I can construct a good scene, but that overarching massive structure of a novel is not something I naturally... I'm too much of a kind of butterfly. Oh, I'm going to take William to the cathedral because the stained glass is lovely. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm too much of a butterfly. Right. So I have to rein myself in and be very, very aware of what my natural strengths and weaknesses are.
So you've started book 2 already?
Yes. Yeah. That's got to be with my editor in about a month's time.
Oh right.
Yeah.
How do you get to the point where, because you're obviously a big lover of research and knowing your stuff before you jump in. One of the things I always struggle with is I will research for years and years and years and not actually write anything.
Because that's the pleasure.
Yeah. So how do you get to the point where you're like, I know enough now to be able to write the story, and I'm okay now. I don't need to go to any places. I don't need to read any more books. I can just jump in, tell the story, and it should be all right.
It happened strangely, I think. So I was thinking of the Red Hollow about third of the way in to Nida Sally's second draft. So you know you were talking about the bit in Battersea Clinton where he's buried standing up. I thought, I just need to take my boy out of the city for a bit.
Right.
And that's where the kind of... And I so enjoyed writing that countryside chapter where he's out near Knoll. In the original script, manuscript, each chapter was a place in Birmingham or Warwickshire or Worcestershire.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So I named each chapter after like a street or a town or whatever. But I really enjoyed writing that countryside stuff. And that's where the second novel permeated. And of course, you'll know this yourself, when you've got an idea for the second, when you're writing the first, you're like, oh, I really, really want to write the countryside one.
It's a killer, isn't it?
Yeah. So I kind of was it was permeating. And then I kind of looked at the history of houses in the area, great houses in the area, the geography of the area and stuff that I wanted to look at. And that came way before I even pitched it to my editor. So a lot of that work was done before I came up with the story.
Do you take lots of notes and things? That I've seen different. Stephen King says, if it's a good idea, it'll stick around. If it's a bad idea, I'll forget it. So he doesn't write anything down. But like Chuck Palahniuk will have them, like he writes his novels in notebooks that he carries around with him on the train. So his latest draft is always on the train with him in a notebook. I find it terrifying. Where do you fall?
And Agatha Christie had scrapbooks, didn't she?
Oh yeah.
She did. Yeah, scrapbooks full of newspaper articles that took her fancy. I'm a bit of both, really. So I've actually got it with me. I can find it on the train. So, notebook full of notes and rubbish, really.
Oh, brilliant.
So that, and I have one per book.
One notebook.
Yeah. So that's my Red Hollow notebook.
Nice.
But also, I've got a lot on my phone. Do you have notes on your phone?
I do audio notes also. I just talk into it.
Oftentimes I'm having a bath. I've had a really bad day writing, and I've got the bath salts in, and then all of a sudden, it comes. I'm like, whoa! And so I have to have my phone
when you're relaxed, right?
By the side of the bath, just in case I come up with something like a solution. But then again, I'm not an organised person. I'm gosh, I wish I was. So I'd love to have like, if you said to me, oh, where are the notebooks for Nida Sally? I'd be like,
right.
Not sure, because I'm done with them. So let's hope I'm never famous, because there's nobody, because there'll be no archive. So so it's a bit of both.
It's good to know though that you're not that organised, because it can seem from the outside that professional writers all have everything together and they've got binders and index cards and all that. So it's nice.
I'm absolute rubbish
on your phone as well.
Rubbish.
Have you sold many books?
Gosh, have I sold many books? I think I'm selling okay. There's some nice things have happened. So I was well reviewed in some good newspapers.
You've had great reviews, I've seen.
But and they tell you every 6 months, right?
So
you don't know right away.
You don't know right away. So I've been well reviewed. And it's been named as one of the books of summer for the Financial Times Book of the Summer thing, so that was good.
Great.
And I'm also doing something called New Blood at Harrogate, which is a big crime festival up north. And New Blood is where 4 crime writers are chosen, debut crime writers are chosen to speak with Val McDermott.
Oh wow!
The great Val McDermott. So that's great. Whether it's selling, it's not on the Times bestseller list or anything like that. But and like I said, I'm pretty sanguine about it. And if you overthink it, you can get terribly stressed about it. But this is a really, when you have a baby and nobody tells you that you're probably going to need an episiotomy, it's going to be pretty bad.
They should have told you.
That's what a debut author is like. Nobody tells you about the good stuff, and you daren't tell any other authors that some bad stuff might happen. It could be quite stressy. But ultimately, you've got a baby.
Right.
You know what I mean? It could be quite a stressy experience, but so if I'm dropped, this is my baby. It happened and I did it. If nobody reads it or everybody hates it, I've got an ugly baby. But nonetheless, this is my baby. So is it selling? It's doing really well critically.
That's great.
And I'm over the moon with that. It might mean that I'm a writer's writer. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It might mean that. But ultimately, it's nice. And this is nice as well, because it means again I get to chat with readers.
Right.
And that's what I wanted.
And I'll just bring back what we were talking about before we started. When you take out library books, authors get royalties.
That's right.
I
So,
sure do. Yeah.
That's right.
So never feel guilty for taking Needless Alley. Take it out 10, 15, 20
Yeah.
times. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good.
Right, we'll wrap it up if that's okay.
No.
Thank you so much.
No,
We
it's
have
been lovely to
copies.
speak with people.
Thank you. We have copies of the book available. It's
Yeah.
not on the library catalogue, so you can't take it out from the library. So if you want to read it, you should. We do have to run them through the till downstairs, but we can, if you'd like to get them signed, we can then take them downstairs and we can sort all that end out afterwards. But thank you very much for what you did.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for all the brilliant questions. Does anybody have any extra questions?
Really
at all?
great. No, I want the book.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we want books.
But thank you.